now turn up.
Boring players. Very boring. Three of them. We got to go through them. Why? Because these three boring players can help you win a championship. And that's all that matters, right? Is winning championships. So we'll go through them, but we're giving away a Jerry Jeudy signed free jersey. You've probably heard that before a bunch of times if you are not new to the channel. So when we hit 1K, we'll be giving it away to one of you guys. We only have about 150 people left, and then we'll be giving it away. And then we're on to the next giveaway. All right. So the first player is probably the least boring, the least amount of throw up in your mouth type style here, but it's Robert Woods. Mr. Robbie Woods, I call him. I like Robbie. So he's 29 years old, and the biggest, I think, problem with Robert Woods is his trajectory of his kind of career. He started off so slow in his career. The first 3-4 years, he was almost non-relevant. Irrelevant. So we were talking about a fantasy finisher in the 50s and 60s for a wide receiver, and he wasn't a good wide receiver. And then 2018, 2019, 2020, his last 3 years have been really good in fantasy football production. And so fantasy football production and dynasty production, for him, he's got, I think, at least a good 2-3 years left into this like Adam Thielen territory. You look at Adam Thielen the last couple of years, he's been producing, and now he's on the other side of 30. He's 31 years old. I could see Robert Woods being 30, 31, having good couple seasons here with Matthew Stafford. His last three finishes, 10, 22, and 13. So you're talking about a top 25 wide receiver, but likely going to be a top maybe even 15 wide receiver for a year or two. The reason why he's not super high in Dynasty is because his career, you look at it and you think, man, he's been around forever. Is he 30, 32, 30? I mean, honestly, if you would have just told me to guess his age, I would have said probably 30 and a half. But he's 29, so I was wrong. He's on the other side of 30. I think this is a good buy now kind of candidate because everyone wants Cooper Kupp, or everyone wants the new Van Jefferson, or just everyone wants the new hotness there. And I think it's just going to be old reliables there. It's going to be Robert Woods. It's going to be Cooper Kupp. It's just going to be those two wide receivers that are going to be dominating a lot of the targets. If you look at his last 3 years of stats, though, last year, 936 yards and 6 touchdowns. So not ideal. I mean, that wasn't amazing. He did have a couple rushing touchdowns as well. But his years previous to that, and this guy is a target monster. We're talking 120 targets, 100 to 130 targets, which is what you want in a receiver. You want lots of targets, lots of catches, very consistent. He is Mr. Consistency. You know exactly what you're going to get from him. 11, 34, and 2 in 2019. So the big touchdown. He's not a big touchdown guy, and you can see that in his career. I think that's why he's not been a top five player. And that's probably why some of his value isn't up to that point, because he hasn't had an amazing top 5 year. But he's kind of been in that, again, 10 and 13 range. 12, 19, and 6 in 2018. So again, that was his number 10 fantasy finish. I think that is that is a position that he could easily get. I said easily again. That is a stat line he could get. I think anywhere between 11:34 and 12:19, like 1,200 yards easily in 17 games. I'm just going to say it's easily in 17 games. With Matthew Stafford, it should be. I think that 1,200 yards is definitely in the realm of possibilities and actually highly likely. That's a better word for it. 6 touchdowns versus 2. I think you could see him getting 5-6 touchdowns. Where does that put him? That puts him right into that like top 15 range. And I can see that this year, and you could even see somewhat of a production like that next year as well. So again, you're getting a 2-year player that is super undervalued, and I keep undervaluing him as well. I think you want to see the new hotness, and he's kind of not old reliable, but he's just somebody that is going to continue to produce like Tyler Boyd, again, like the boring players. Oh, tired. Like I don't want to talk about. This player doesn't sound like he sounds kind of boring. And the next player might even make you throw up in your mouth, which is going to be David Johnson. Now, did you just throw up? If you did, please call the David Johnson hotline. No, I'm just kidding. If you guessed his fantasy football production, he had 12 games. If you guessed what his production was, total points, I would have probably guessed, I owned him, and I would have probably guessed like 30, 35, but fantasy finish of 19 in 12 games. So he's somebody that is still being undervalued. 29 years old. He's got a year left. I think that's what it comes down to. Do you need a depth piece for your championship run? I think this guy will be David Johnson will be a perfect fit there. I don't think Phillip Lindsay is going to take over. There's no one else in Houston that's going to be threatening that. So you're pretty much stuck with David Johnson. Deshaun Watson might not be there. Does that matter? That offense is, I mean, it matters maybe for his touchdown upside. That offense might be super bad. It just might be. You might be looking at the Jets of 2020 as Houston 2021, but I guess you could say David Johnson's probably floor is what Frank Gore did last year. So look at that as being a potential possibility. His upside, though, is still top 20 fantasy finish. I think that is easily in the possibilities and easily in the cards for David Johnson. He had 1,000 plus yards in 12 games. 1,000 plus yards. Why can he not get 1,400 yards in 17 games? Like, that is on pace for what he did last year. He just needs to stay healthy, and he hasn't stayed healthy in the last couple of years, and that's his biggest downfall, really. So is he? He there's times that he looked good last year, and there's times that he looked kind of rough last year. And so do you think you're going to get David Johnson of 2019, or do you think you're going to get David Johnson of 30-year-old broken down running back? I think we're going to get a little bit more of the running back that is 28 versus the running back that is 30. My personal opinion. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. These are the boring players that people are not going to like, but they're going to be contributing in fantasy football in 2021. All right, the last one. Mr. Boring himself, and I don't know why. I feel like, well, actually, I have an idea why, but it is Brandon Cooks. He is 27 years old. He's been traded to a million different teams, it feels like, and he's produced on every single team, whether they've been good, whether they've been bad. He had 1,150 yards and 6 touchdowns last year, which is quietly fantasy finish of 16. If you look at his finishes the last, 6 years? 12, 8, 7, 13, 62, and 16. You take the 62 away because he had some concussion issues and he had a bunch of issues there. We're looking at 12, 8, 7, 13, 16. Where do you think he might finish at 27 years old in his prime? Probably right into that area. I mean, yeah, he might not have touchdown upside, but guess what? He hasn't had touchdown upside in his entire career. He's a 5-6 touchdown producer. That's pretty consistent with his entire career. So why would that change? He's not going to be a 10 touchdown guy, but he could easily be a 12, 1,300 and 4 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns type of wide receiver, and you're back at wide receiver 15 for at least a year, maybe 2, maybe 3 years. It's easily in the cards for Brandon Cooks, and Brandon Cooks is just being undervalued. He's at 1,000 plus yards in 5 of his 6 years. The only one was 2019. I'm trying to do the math in my head. So, again, 3 very, very boring players. And there's other boring players, too. Sometimes Keenan Allen can be boring. I don't understand that. And he was being devalued for periods of time. Tyler Boyd, kind of the same thing. Trying to think of any other players off the top of my head. I mean, just some of these players, they just don't have that amazing, like Brandon Cooks will not be a top 5 wide receiver. Robert Woods will not be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football. But if you have a Mr. 15 finish in fantasy football, that is an excellent wide receiver to if you have A.J. Brown or Justin Jefferson or some other wide receiver. Adam Thielen was that boring wide receiver that I used to love because, of course, Minnesota Vikings fan, and now I feel like now he's at the point where he's 31. He's starting to get to the point where maybe he's going to fall off the cliff. But I loved Adam Thielen because he was a guy that he was always undervalued. I could always buy low. And he would always produce way above where I bought him for. And so that's exactly where you're buying Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, David Johnson. I'm sorry, but I understand that another one, I guess, I'm giving you bonus guys. Tyler Lockett is another guy. Yeah, oh my goodness, they drafted Dwayne Eskridge. No, it's Tyler Lockett. He's going to be the wide receiver 2 there. He's going to have 1,000 yards. He's going to have 6, 7 touchdowns, maybe all against Arizona. I think that's where he scored most of his touchdowns last year. I haven't looked. But I know that he scored a bunch of touchdowns in like 2 games. And you know what? He might be a really good fill-in person. Yeah, he might be frustrating, but that offense can be frustrating. Tyler Lockett, another kind of boring name, but a guy to build on. These are players that just get undervalued that are going to help you with your championship now. And that's all that matters. So, again, this is Marcus Dynasty Football Dads. We're giving away Jerry Jeudy free signed jersey. Please subscribe and comment who is your boring named person. It doesn't have to be running back or wide receiver. It could be quarterback. Who is your boring player? Ryan Tannehill could be another one. So just PSA announcement, I guess you could say. All right. Peace out. See you tomorrow.
Now turn up.